I'm gonna um, other covenant coaches and also moms of large families. So Maggie is amazing. She has 11 kids and she's also a covenant coach. And so I'm just gonna start right in and just ask you, Maggie, because I want to know about why you decided to have a large family. Because it's actually, I don't think most of us, like for me, I know I didn't, we all have some path that we went on to get to that point. And so can you tell us what that was like for you?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because it's kind of like I feel like it's like a twofold answer because um, in a marriage, it's two people, right? We have a husband and a wife and everyone, and you grow up and you come together and have your different views on what you might want for your life. And so for me as a child, I've always been around children and babies, and my mom always had a very nurturing atmosphere growing up. So I've loved children forever. And all I ever wanted in my life was to grow up and get married and have kids. Now, I never really had a number like, my mom, and because I always have to attribute it to her because she grew up Irish Catholic. And so when I was growing up, when I was born, she was still Catholic for a little bit until she came to know the Lord in an intimate, personal way. And so what happened was she always said she was going to have 12 kids. So I kind of grew up with an atmosphere and ideology that like that was normal, like that would be what people might think. And so, that's not necessarily the status quo of the world or even my peers, but for some reason in my family, she was going to do that. And then she had three of us and was like, it's crazy. My husband's a doctorate and doing all his schooling and like, let's have a break, And then they took a break, and she always told the story that she blinked and 10 years went by. And then they're like, well, I guess 12 is a little much. So they had decided to just have three more. And then she had my sister one and then said, no, okay, we're done. And that was like at 34 years old. So that's my example.
Yeah.
But in between time, she always brought children into the home. She always babysat other people's kids. So even though I was like the youngest of the first batch of kids, I always had little babies around. I was working in the nursery at church, and I just had always had a love for children. And I've always had a very, I guess, technically old-fashioned view of family and marriage and womanhood and motherhood, and just really honoring the role of wife and mother. I've always seen that as a very high calling. And so my education and my schooling didn't necessarily complement that, but if anything, it only infused more passion to me in it, because I saw the degrading of the woman and motherhood and being a wife as something looked down upon. And as an early believer, I came to Christ when I was like 5 years old. I saw that intuitively as an attack on God's ordained order. So for me, it only infused and gave me more passion of a love for children, and a love for that must be a good thing. If the world hates it so much, it must be good. And so now I did, like I said, I never did have a number. So because I have such an open-hearted love for whatever the Lord gives. So that was my attitude toward it. I was open to whatever. So then I met my husband, and he was like, okay, I want 3 before I'm 30. That was his thought. I want 3 before I'm 30. And it was kind of like never another number was expressed outside of that. And when I met him and we got together, my attitude was like, I'm just glad you want any. Like, hey, that's great. You want 3 before 30? I never said, I don't hear a cutoff number on that, but I also don't hear it didn't seem limited to me. It was just like, okay, you're interested in children. You do want them. So good, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
And I never intended necessarily, like I said, to have a certain number. And so my heart was just open. And yet then we got married, and we, this is just going to be a birth control conversation. Because I mean, when people ask about whether or not why you had kids and all the jazz, it's still not my soapbox, but it seems to be where the Lord keeps taking my conversations lately. So I'll be happy to share kind of where the Lord has taken us. And really that started off right before we got married, even with my mom sharing this little pamphlet with me, or something that was talked about. I think it was family planning and the Lordship of Christ. There was little something that she had. I literally scoffed at it and kind of was like, whatever. I'm like, you don't practice this. Why are you giving this to me? That was my arrogant, 19-year-old attitude. And yes, I got married at 19 and my husband was 23. And so, so having that young, youthful, prideful attitude, I didn't take the advice And it was because of, like I judged the messenger instead of the message. And so the Lord chose to use other means, in that we used birth control thinking it was the right thing to do, right? Because we only had one person in our life at that time. It was an elder at our church, a friend of ours, who basically pulled my husband and I aside and basically said, listen, don't wait to have kids. He's the only person who really was very adamant about really saying, you're never going to be ready. So just understand this right now. You're never going to be ready. And so don't wait. It's not worth the risk, is really what he was saying. And he came from a place of true intimacy with that pain, because his wife and he could never have children. So they eventually adopted 4 children. And this is coming at the heels of them all being, and they adopted in their teen years. So it was a rocky road. And yet at the same time, it came from a place of knowledge and experience, that he was letting us know that, like, don't be arrogant and assume that just because people say that you can have kids at the drop of a hat, that's true. And don't assume that because you have 1 or 2 or 3 kids that, oh, you're fertile myrtle, and it's just always going to be that way. I know so many people who just like tie their tubes and do all these extreme gestures for their bodies or their husband's bodies when they go, oh gosh, I'm just so fertile. And it's like, you have 3 kids or 2 kids. And isn't that instead of seeing it as a blessing, they see that as a curse, and they close off the flow of the Lord's blessing through that. So literally.
I guess I just hear too, Maggie, because I mean, I had 3 kids before I was on the path to raising a larger family. But I hear the mindset of, you were open to whatever God wanted,
Right.
And that's when I had 3 kids, that's when I became open to, okay, God, whatever you want here.
Yeah. And there's a physical, there's a mental open, and then there's a physical, there's the actual physical act of being available. So my heart may have been open, but I kinked the hose. I was using birth control. We were stopping the ability. So having that attitude was different than actually walking it out and living it. And so I was patiently kind of thinking, oh, we were gonna, I don't know, wait a year or 2. And so I'm young and was very much open and wanting kids right away or whenever, but I was patient thinking, okay, well, I'll be patient if my husband wants to wait a year or 2. So we did. And once we hit that almost 2-year mark, I started being like, really, like, you want 3 before 30 and you're 26, like 25, 26, do you think they're going to be triplets? Like, what are you thinking? So my mind is thinking, we got to get something started if we're going to have any before you're 30. And so, but he was still very resistant and scared to death, really, to be honest with you. He had never held a baby in his life, so he did not have my experience. He may have had an open idea, but it was a nice theory, not necessarily action. So the Lord brought in another person who gave us some wisdom through a book that they shared with us, and it was called A Full Quiver, and it kind of started a whole movement. But I wouldn't say that I'm in a movement. It's the Lord's moving in the spirits of people to align with his desires and his will for their life. And so I read that book, and I love that it was written by a man. First of all, I thought that was great, because that really helped dispel the whole idea that women are trying to manipulate men into having a whole bunch of kids. There's so much I was trying to keep from being some like accusation possibly in the future. And anyway, I read that book, and it really convicted me biblically. It got me searching scripture and seeing that God sees children and gives children as a blessing and a gift. There's nowhere in scripture that they are anything but that. And if that's true, and it's all about, do I take God at his word or don't I? Do I believe him, or do I just want to believe what I want to believe?
Right. And how many kids did you have in what amount of time? What was
So the span is 21 years, and I had 11.
Okay.
So seeing that ratio, it's about every other year. Some were crunched. In my 20s, they were about 18 months apart. In my 30s, they pushed to close to 2 years. And in my 40s, they were 3 years apart. So it's very interesting how, as I got older, they kind of spaced out. But then, of course, I shouldn't even say that, because I stopped bearing so far. My 11th baby was born when I was 42.
Okay.
So I've had 9 miscarriages. I've had 5 miscarriages since the latest child, my 7-year-old, and so I've had multiple miscarriages, and I just kind of stopped counting. So that's where I'd had a few miscarriages before that, but this is where it's been consistent, and it's just one of those, like, um, part of the journey of really. I remember laughing when I had my first C-section at my 9th baby was a C-section. And I remember laughing, going, Lord, you want me to have a baby like every way, underwater, out on the bed. And then eventually my 10th baby was in a car. Like, so I went, okay, I get to have a baby every single possible way, except upside down, like, but she was breathing.
Wow.
So there's all these things. And I thought, okay, I get to have these experiences so I can be able to relate and share with almost any mom, whatever her scenario was. Like,
Wow. So you had that many children, and I know that in the process of raising them, you had to gain a mindset to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So what was your mindset? What are a couple things that really served you during the years when there were some hard years. I know that because I had some hard years, but what served you during that time?
That's a really good question, because I think there are different seasons called for different kinds of mindsets from the Lord, and different adjustments in my attitude. Being open, I kind of started from a really blessed place that I actually had a positive attitude, as opposed to having to transform my attitude from resistance to children. So I didn't have to go through that. So that's a different journey than someone who else might have struggled with being open to the idea. But once I started having kids, I would say that the difficulties came through social ridicule. They came through financial difficulty. They came through also my own insecurities and judgments of myself, of my abilities, what I'm capable of. And so those are just like the top right there. I would say that by the time I had probably 4 children, I used the word overwhelm a lot. I started to see myself when people go, how are you? And I just go, oh, overwhelmed. Like it was a no-brainer, no big deal. I could use that word freely. And I remember the Lord really convicting me one day as I was in my quiet time. And I had said that, and I'm praying to him and kind of pouring myself out to him and asking for help. And he's going, you need to stop saying that word. Like, that's a banned word in your life now. That is no longer allowed to utter from your mouth. Because he just hit me over the head with saying, you saying that is telling me that I've given you more than you can handle, and I didn't. So there's a gap here. And suddenly I was like, oh, this is a discipline for me. This is a discipline for me to discipline my mouth, to not claim that as true. So I confessed and repented and said, okay, Lord, I won't use the word overwhelmed to describe myself anymore. I'm fully equipped, is what he told me. You are fully equipped. And it's like, okay, so I am fully equipped for every good work. And that was the new mindset shift that I got to replace my overwhelm with. Excuse me. And when I discovered that, I got to walk that out in a real tangible way, obviously, with every child, with how I responded to noise in the house, how I responded to bickering, all those things. And so some of the mindsets that really served me is, number one, I'm fully equipped, that God will never give me anything more than I can handle. And so I receive everything he gives me with joy. I receive everything he gives me as a gift. And that included the bickering, that included whatever might be happening, because this was an opportunity for me to exercise my motherhood, my love for my children, and my example of my relationship with the Lord and how I interact with them. So those all became tools for me to just walk the walk he called me to walk as a mom.
That's beautiful. It's amazing. I know in my life, something similar, but more like seeing my kids as a blessing. And often when people would say, which kids were harder, or whatever, and I usually said it was usually me that needed the adjustment if things were hard.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, that's beautiful how you shared how the Lord said, I've equipped you, and then you took everything as a gift, and just an opportunity to learn and grow.
And when we do that, like I like how you just said that, like when we take on God's perspective and have that, it's such a gift for us when we start with us and realize that it isn't to be blamed on any of our circumstances. Like it's within us to receive and approach our lives
Yeah.
from God's perspective. And
Mhm.
when we approach it from any other, we're going to get conflict. We're going to get, well, I don't know, bad attitudes and really having that I word at the beginning of every sentence. It's going to be, I can't do this and I can't do that. I think that was the biggest conviction about even having children. When I read that book, the Lord showed me that every single excuse that I could come up with, or that others or anyone I spoke with came up with on why not to have children, the
Mhm.
sentence began with an I.
Right.
And I
Wow.
thought, then I'm consulting the wrong source when I want to find out whether or not that's something I should do or not.
Wow, that's cool. Well, Maggie, I have a few more minutes and then I have to go get kids, but I wanted to just mention you're a covenant coach.
Yes.
And do you, what ways, just a couple ways that you see God prepared you for being a coach just
Mm,
through your life so
yeah.
far, you know?
You know, being a coach has been such a blessing because gaining tools to be able to help and support moms and my kids, like other moms, my kids, my husband, even in processing the circumstances of life. Um, the life coaching skills have leveled up my ability to really efficiently and lovingly approach helping them navigate the world as it is
Mhm.
now, as it's been for the last 20 years. And
Yeah.
so what equipped me for that was the fact that so many people would come to me and ask for advice or ask for suggestions or how do I handle this and A, B, and C. And it's been a natural, beautiful next step of equipping and that we're not, we're fully equipped through the Lord, but we're also given beautiful freedom to have tools that we get to put in our tool belt of things, and we get to navigate this life in leveling up in that way. I mean, you have an electrician who knows how to do something at a certain level. Well, going to a master class, he's going to get even more skills. So it's not like he's not capable, but that's the cool thing. God gave us with the ability to learn, the ability to absorb new tools and information, and so having lots of kids and having also the ability to those interpersonal relationships. I mean, I used to call it our home is just a cauldron of character. It's a
Yeah.
constant boiling pot of developing and
Yeah.
refining gold, right? It's refining gold, and all of the dross comes to the top, and we skim it off, and that's coaching. We skim it off with coaching, and we replace it with positive, powerful thoughts, and what the Lord would have us transform our minds on what to think and what to dwell on.
Yes, that's amazing. Well, I want to say Maggie's amazing coach and she's an amazing person overall. And if anyone out there is interested, like felt a connection with Maggie, she's on Facebook, right, Maggie? You
Yep,
can
we're on Facebook.
messenger her or whatever and find her and I'm sure she'd be willing to serve you and whatever the need was. So
Yeah, Jackie, thank
anyway,
you so much because you've just been such a blessing in my life too. It's just been so neat for us to be able to iron sharpening iron, right? Even just as covenant coaches together, having those skills and abilities to just get to to really get more intimate with people, even in as the world is today, how far apart we don't even live in the same town, and yet we can create such intimate connections with people and build relationships and really just grow in the Lord. And that's what's so awesome. So this is
yeah,
a great
yeah.
opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you and enjoy your afternoon. And it was
You
great
too.
talking with you.
Thanks.
Okay, see ya.